Hello everyone, welcome back to this channel. You can see the reflection of my phone in my glasses. I'm sorry about that. Hello everyone, welcome back to this channel. Thank you for coming. I am Cami from Breast Search, and today we are going to do a little bit of a different format because I am trying desperately to finish my thesis and I don't have a lot of time to put in this YouTube video right now because I'm trying to have a master's degree. Anyway, today I thought I was going to talk about the books that I'm reading right now, or some books that I've read, or some chapters that I've read that I thought were interesting and why it was interesting and what are my thoughts about it. If you like this format, please make sure to tell me in the comments so that we can do more of these in the future. And yes, I hope you will enjoy it. So before we start, I also wanted to say that most of what I read is for my studies. I don't really take the time to read other things unless I'm on vacation or I have a free weekend, which didn't happen that often in the past semester. It will be very psychology oriented. If you're not interested by that, feel free to see another of my videos or to just watch another video on YouTube. So before we start, I wanted to give a small disclaimer about the fact that the author was a priest, and I know it can be triggering for some people. So if it is, you can look in the description down below and skip the talking about this specific book and chapter. This is editing me thinking that there's another disclaimer that needs to be made, that this chapter is written by a priest and therefore his point of view on Spanish colonization in Mexico is extremely church-oriented. It's a very religious point of view. It doesn't reflect in any means my thought on the topic, or neither just history in general. It's just a very narrowed point of view of what happens, and I wouldn't want anyone to be offended, especially Mexican people, to hear this point of view. It's just what church have been teaching and saying about this historical fact. It doesn't reflect in any mean the reality of history. So yeah, hope you enjoy it anyway. So what is the main idea of Auping Birch? It is that understanding the culture of your country and how patterns were created gives you the freedom of choice. Meaning, if you understand where something comes from, including what you do consciously or unconsciously, you can then decide if you want to keep on perpetuating this pattern or if you want to change your behavior. The author kind of considers that you don't really have freedom unless it's a conscious choice to be acting in a certain way. Also, to give you context, mestizaje, which was the process of mixing race, happened during the colonization in Mexico, and it was basically made to improve the indigenous race. So instead of doing like the United States and just killing all indigenous people to get on their lands, Spanish people really thought they were doing a very good thing for humanity by obliging people to become Christians and marrying white Spanish men with indigenous women to have more white children so that they improve the race. Of course, it's a very old perspective, but I thought it was an important context to be having before we start the explanation of the chapter. So, what would happen back in the day? They would marry some white Spanish man to some indigenous woman, and of course the white Spanish man would be extremely disdainful towards the indigenous. He would despise her and he would consider her as less than for being indigenous. So this woman who doesn't have any love, care, respect, or just consideration in general has a child that we call the mestizo. She will try to find all of her source of love and acceptance with this child. The problem is that she will be overbearing and overprotective of them and will not accept, for example, that they would leave the house or try to independize themselves, because it would be an abandonment for them that their child would leave. And we actually still see this in some Mexican households nowadays. The children waiting as long as possible to leave the house. It is mainly due to the economy and not as much as the overbearing mom, but I know for some it is a mix of both reasons. So the mom would be overbearing, and when the child arrives at his teenage years, he is trying to find some kind of freedom and independence, and he is going to seek real acceptance and recognition from his father. The problem is that because he has indigenous blood, the father won't recognize him, won't let him in to his world. It will be deeply hurtful for the teenager, and he would go from the teenage years to the adult years in deep pain that will make him feel angry and just hateful of the father figure and other men in general. So he will try to go back to a childlike stage in order to find the comfort and love that he once had with his mother. The problem with the childlike stage is the following. You don't really understand the concept of putting down the line something good and just do sacrifices to have something good at the end of a project or after a certain amount of time, and you mostly seek instant gratification. This kind of pattern of seeking instant gratification can explain a lot of different things within the Mexican culture, like corruption or the presidential system, for example. The book really goes very deeply into the details of how it applies to the culture and what each of these patterns has to do with that. For example, he talks about how women really has the tendency to have extreme religious belief because they live in such a sexist environment and where they're demonized, that all of their promises now comes from God. For example, it also explained corruption, the presidential system, I think I've already said it, sexism, of course the marginalization of indigenous people and other patterns. I highly recommend to read this chapter. I haven't read any other chapter of this book. Obviously, I didn't agree with everything. I am myself kind of triggered sometimes by a religious person doing academic work, but I thought it was extremely interesting, and I thought it could help us all think about the patterns that we see within our culture. For example, I am French, and right now it is famously known that the French people are very mad at our current president for a law that he is passing about retirement. And it's not only about retirement age, it's about the whole system of the retirement law that is problematic. And the president has as an excuse the idea that it's the only way to make it work, which is not. There is a problem with the retirement system, which is we don't have enough money, and the main reason why we don't have enough money for it is because most people don't give birth anymore. We don't make children, or we don't make enough children in France to sustain the retirement system. And so if we don't have enough workers, not enough people will be able to have enough money to survive retiring. The only answer to this is not people working longer years, and I want to be very clear about that. There is a very easy answer to this problem, which is legal immigration. And I am not talking about accepting people to come in our country so that they work for us. I mean accepting people in our country, our culture, as our neighbors and as our equals, to work with us. And the problem with this idea that I have is that the French people are genuinely very racist. So the problem of racism, I'm not really sure what the root of it is, but I think it would be interesting to be examining it from a historical and psychological point of view. Of course, I don't take away the individual responsibility of people when they're acting in a bad way. So if someone is being outwardly racist, or if someone is abusive or very sexist or corrupted, I am not saying that by understanding where it comes from, it just lifts off all of the responsibility of their behaviors. What I am saying is that if someone has this behavior and understand where it comes from, then he can decide if he wants to continue doing it or not. But someone who does something bad should definitely leave the consequences of his actions. So yeah, I thought it was a very interesting read and chapter, and if you do too, make sure to comment why, or if you have any idea where some patterns comes from in your culture, I would be more than happy to read it. Also, if you have any idea or any psychological analysis of where the racism in France come from, because I'm pretty sure it was there before colonization, I would absolutely adore to talk with you. Feel free to leave a comment, and we will go to the next reading now. Okay, so the second read is also a chapter from a book that I've read for my master's, and I've read it in Spanish. The title is La Nueva Psicología del Amor, and chapter is Los Pecados de los Padres. The author is called Scott Peck. He's a psychiatrist, and he wrote his work in English. I think the correct title is The Road Less Traveled. And I suppose the chapter would be the sins of the fathers or the parents. So yeah, that will be our second read. So I am very sorry. As you can hear, I have some window problems, and it was supposed to be fixed by my landlord, but he's taking quite a time for it. So I'm very sorry if you hear some weird noises coming within the video. So this chapter is generally talking about parenting and different stages of a child's understanding of what is going on. It is one of my favorite topics in the whole world to be talking about. And this chapter is fascinating. It opens on the idea that when you see a teenager that is undisciplined, your first common thought would be that they lack discipline at home in general. And in reality, they could be actually facing, at the contrary, a very violent discipline at home. The problem at heart here is not actually the discipline, but the rigor. What do I refer to when I talk about rigor? I refer to coherence, and as we said, talking about the precedent chapter, the idea of understanding that sometimes you need to be having kind of a bad moment or not such a great moment several times until you have a very good outcome of your actions. And if you have had a parent that is incoherent, for example, that says they're going to do something and doesn't do it, or say they're not going to do something and then do it, or if they don't keep up with their promises, the child grows up thinking, because they don't have the tools to understand correctly what is going on, they grow up thinking that it is a normal behavior, and so they don't understand what it is like to have coherence between what you say and what you do. And most importantly, they don't necessarily understand the impact on a long term of what they are doing. As when they have seen, for example, a parent say, I really take care of myself to be in a better shape, to be a better dad, and then the child sees the dad go to the gym and having not such great moments every week, twice a week, all the time, and then suddenly they can start play football together, or he can run for longer, or he can play longer time. He sees the rigor and he understands that there is longer term impact of his actions, and that he shouldn't only focus on instant gratification. Now, there is one case scenario, even in a chaotic family or surrounding, where the child develops those tools to understand the long run, and this is basically love. Amazing, isn't it? It's kind of the answer to most of everything by raising a child. The logic in the understanding development is that something or someone is loved, and therefore it's valuable. And therefore we dedicated time to enjoy it and take care of it. So for example, well, in general, you can see that with children or even with a pet. If the child sees the benefit of caring the pet, for example, he needs to eat and to drink, he has basic needs, then the child will understand, in order for me to spend more time, longer years with my pet, and to be able to enjoy its company, and I walk together and everything, for him to be in a good health, I need to take care of him, and this implies give him food, give him water, make sure he doesn't fall sick, and if he is sick, take care of him, and give him love, obviously. And so this understanding really can be changed by love, thanks to this process that the child is doing in his head. So let me remind you the process. Something or someone is loved, therefore it is valuable, and therefore we dedicated time to enjoy it and take care of it. The child will kind of learn to love himself if he is in a loving environment, so he will learn to take care of himself, thanks to the example that gives them his parents. And the feeling of value is really key to creating auto-discipline. The only problem is that if you grew up with this feeling of value, it is almost impossible that anyone takes it away from you. I mean, you can have some ups and downs and sometimes forget your value or whatever, but with the correct therapy or help, you will find it back without too many difficulties. And the problem is that it is a very difficult thing to build if you grew up without it. My thoughts on the topic. I think parenting and psychology of itself is such an important topic, and it should be common knowledge. So if you want to know more about the topic, if you want my channel to become common knowledge about parenting, even though I don't have any children, it would be speaking totally theoretically, so I could do it. And I think it's important knowledge to have even if you don't have children. Even if one child is in your life, it is extremely important. So even if you only have a niece or a nephew, or if the point is, if you have children in your life one way or another, I think it would be a great thing to learn about. I think it's important to learn to love a child from a healed place and not from a trauma response place, and this is why this information is so important. Once again, if you understand at a personal or social level or cultural level or just a family level where your patterns comes from, why you react in a certain way, you can then decide to heal a difficult experience or change it. And I think this is extremely powerful, and I think this is how we will make a better world someday, by treating correctly our children. So these are my thoughts. Maybe a little bit too optimistic for most of YouTube, but I am a very optimistic person. So these are my thoughts on this second chapter. So our next book is actually not for my studies, but since I'm a sucker for my studies, I still read topic-related books in my free time, and I kind of discovered that I have a really hard time reading anything else because I feel guilty when I have a little bit of pleasure reading something other than what I'm studying. But I also really love my studies, so that's okay. So the third book is called The Myth of Normal. I have it here. It's a big book. It's written by Maté and with his son Daniel Maté. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it well, but they are Canadians and it kind of looks like French names, so I hope pronouncing it with a French accent will do. So that's our third book. I'm not gonna lie, I have been waiting for this book for a very long time, and I haven't read all of it yet. I'm only 100 pages in, but I thought I was going to talk about the chapter that I liked most, which is chapter 4, Everything I'm Surrounded By, Dispatches from the New Science. Before getting into it, I want to really thank my grandma for these amazing Christmas presents. I really wanted to have this book. What I usually do, since I'm too much of a grown-up to ask for Legos, well, actually I would still really love to have Legos, but I don't necessarily want to spend money on books if I'm not sure I'm going to read them, especially such a huge book. What I do is that I send a list of the books that I would really love. It's an exhaustive list. There are way too many books on those lists. I send it each year to my mom, and from time to time my grandma and some aunts will decide to buy me one of them, and I have to say it was the best choice ever. Thank you so much, Mamie. Je t'aime vraiment très fort. So, why did I love this chapter so much? The main reason why I really loved this chapter is because it is talking about epigenetic studies. What are epigenetic studies, you ask? But well, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. The epigenetic study is the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. I am not a native English speaker and I'm not sure how to say genes, but it's the thing within your body. Genes. Anyway, so in this particular chapter, it explains how stressful experiences and behaviors in early childhood and or even pregnancy can affect a child growing up. It can influence their behavior and their approach to life and stress in their teenage years, but also studies showing that it can impact health, language, PMA, even IQ, even though it's not necessarily a factor that I would take personally into consideration. So epigenetic studies have shown that even circumstantial stresses can influence someone's health. So for example, your economic status, or if you are poor or rich, basically can influence that. And more specifically, there exists two different ages of someone. So there is your age, meaning how long you have been on this planet Earth, and there is your biological age. So your genes either grow old faster or slower depending on the amount of stress you are facing on a day-to-day basis, or if a very extremely stressful thing happens. So basically you have your normal age and then you have your biological age, meaning that some circumstances can make you age faster, it makes you more vulnerable to illnesses, and it will make you die faster, literally. The quoted stresses would be, for example, your economical situation, because you need to think constantly about how you're going to eat, where you're going to sleep. For some basic thing. In France, we don't really have this problem of health insurance because we have free healthcare. But in the United States, a normal occurrence as your child break a leg or an arm by bike or playing football or whatever can cost you so much money that you indebt yourself in order just to fix their arm. So even going to the hospital for a normal thing is a luxury. And so this stress that you have on your shoulders all of the time, it literally kills you faster. And then other type of stresses like racism, discrimination, are shown to create more inflation too within your genes, and that's what is causing its aging. I thought it is a very interesting topic, especially when privileged people don't want to acknowledge their privilege, when even biologically there is proof that you have a higher probability to have illnesses or to die faster or just to age in not such a graceful way if you are confronted with discrimination, racism, or poverty. I think it's very interesting. I think I haven't made up my mind entirely on the topic yet, but I think it is definitely something we should be talking more about, the impact that our society has on our health, and use great scientific studies made by great scientists to explain it. So yeah, that was the chapter number 3. I would really love to read in the comment if anyone has a specific point of view on the topic, or if anyone has more information. I mean, I have more information, I just haven't read it all yet. I just think it's a great way to start a conversation, and of course be respectful and loving. So yes, these were the 3 books I wanted to share with you. I hope you thought it was interesting. I would love to talk about those topics with you on the comments. Once again, in a very respectful and loving way, I remind everyone that this is a safe space, and I would really like to create a beautiful community where we can talk and debate and create together and feel free to be ourselves. Being free to be ourselves also means respect others' limits and freedom. I hope you really enjoyed this different format and video. I hope you thought it was interesting topics. I know I'm a bit of a psychological nerd and social analysis nerd, but I mean, if so are you, please join me or us. I don't really have anything to link it to creativity somehow. I think it's because I'm not using my readings as a creative tool in general. It's been a few years I've almost only used it for my studies, and because I have read so much for my studies, I was getting tired of reading, so I didn't want to do that in my free time, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people can relate. But I am almost done with my master's degree. I am very soon on vacation, so if you want to, I don't know, advise me on some distracting reading I could do, or some more study related topics I could read, please make sure to comment it. If you like the video, make sure to like it and subscribe if you want to see more of these. I will see you very soon. Thank you. Take care.